1998 was a good year for rising star Juan Pablo Montoya.
I became Juan because in America, they couldn't say Juan Pablo, so it turned to Juan.
The Colombian driver had just signed for reigning champions Williams as test driver, and he was headed for victory in Formula 3000, which in the 90s was the feeder series for F1. And when he finally arrived in 2001, expectations in the paddock were high. He'd won an IndyCar title in his rookie year and had the F3000 and F1 test driver credentials to back him up. So how did that success and a mid-season tennis injury
Hey Gordo, don't play tennis, you're not good at it.
end up transpiring in Lewis Hamilton taking his seat at McLaren in 2007 and winning the championship the following year?
Guys, I'm speechless. That was so freaking close.
Sir Frank Williams' interest had been piqued watching Montoya in F3000, as his Williams F1 team entered a tough spell after losing Renault's works engines. He signed him as a test driver for 1998, with an F1 contract from 2001 onwards. Although Montoya had won the F3000 title in 1998, Frank Williams was determined to bring former F1 driver Alex Zanardi back to the sport from 1999. He'd last driven for the iconic Lotus name in F1, but when Colin Chapman's old outfit folded in 1994, he turned to the States and found success. He was now two-time kart champion with Chip Ganassi Racing. His stock was high. Ganassi were also interested in Montoya, and a deal was done to bring Montoya over to IndyCar with Ganassi, while Zanardi returned to F1. Their fortunes couldn't have been more different.
It's still a new toy for me, and I still to practice a little more in order to be more familiar with the car, but I'm sure it'll come.
With factory Renault supply now gone, Williams' Supertech branded engines were a year old, and Adrian Newey, who designed their championship-winning cars, had departed for McLaren. While Zanardi struggled to adapt to the Williams machines and F1's new groove tyres, Montoya had burst onto the scene, taking the kart championship in his rookie season. Having won races in all of the categories in which he'd raced, and demonstrated sensational speed and aggressive bravery on the 200+ mile-an-hour ovals in America, Montoya was seen by many fans across the globe as a man who possessed huge talent. They desperately wanted to see somebody challenge the dominant Michael Schumacher and Ferrari. It was also the right time to be at Williams, as they went into their second year regrouping around potent engines from a full BMW factory effort.
I think for starting as a Formula 1 driver and a really good position, I had 2 years in kart, and that gave me a lot of experience. I think the oval racing gave me a different experience, new things that you learn as well, that sometimes you might be able to apply here.
He made a relatively quiet debut in Australia and Malaysia, but in his third Grand Prix, the Brazilian Grand Prix at Interlagos on April the 1st, he sensationally laid down a marker to Schumacher when he pulled off a breathtaking passing move on the German, going into the first corner on the third lap.
But look at Juan Montoya, he's looking very racy indeed, already trying to charge down the inside of Michael Schumacher. This is what we were promised when Montoya came into Formula 1, a feisty, aggressive racer, and we've got it. Montoya leads, fantastic.
As he momentarily banged wheels with the Ferrari, Williams and his business partner Patrick Head saw in Montoya the same chutzpah their favourite champion Alan Jones had exuded when they first started winning races. With his insouciant, tell-it-like qui saw it character, Montoya was an instant hit, a breath of fresh air in the paddock.
Play a decent race, get to the end, get 2 points, go up happy.
And to them, he was a real racer. Exactly their type of driver. A strategic nip-and-tuck race win in Italy that year saw him become the first Colombian to win a Grand Prix, and justified the expectations that he could beat Schumacher.
Brilliant! 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 Great job, guys! Great job! Well done, Juan. Well done. This is my show. Yeah!
Further wins followed, but there were times when he paid a high price for occasional hot-headedness. And this began to grate on a team that expected their drivers to avoid unnecessary mistakes. There were also concerns within the team that he was, at times, out-qualified and out-raced by his teammate, Michael Schumacher's younger brother, Ralf. He should have won the opening 2003 race in Australia, but an unforced error saw him spin with 11 laps to go, and hand the win to David Coulthard.
Montoya spun, backs it into the wall. Coulthard leads the Grand Prix.
Juan Montoya has made a terrible mistake.
I went into turn 1, picked up the throttle, and I just got sideways when I picked up the throttle. And that was it, really. There's nothing to it.
At the French Grand Prix, he angrily abused his Williams crew over the radio after mistakenly believing they'd favoured his teammate for the victory.
I mean, he's obviously been told he can't pass Ralph. So you've got a very disinterested Montoya out there at the moment.
A bit frustrating the last few races, but we're frustrating, but we're second. It's crazy.
It didn't help that he believed that Ralph was earning considerably more than he was. Now that the honeymoon period was well and truly over, Williams and Head were less enthused about his occasional lapses in temperament, which created intra-team tensions, and he was summoned to team headquarters for an official dressing down. Nevertheless, he seemed a genuine contender for the 2003 World Championship. That was until a controversial ruling prior to the Italian Grand Prix at Monza in September saw the FIA revise the protocols for measuring front tyre width. This compromised Michelin by forcing them to redesign their tyres at the last moment.
We asked precisely how and when are you going to measure it? Answer was new. Fine, we worked accordingly.
An oral answer or a written answer?
Oral. There was four people present. 4 from the FIA and 2 of us.
And when was that answer given?
Was in before Imola, 2001.
McLaren boss Ron Dennis described the unexpected changes, which also impacted his team, as being taken just when they were reaching ramming speed in their own championship challenge.
Anything which influences the rhythm and pace that you bring to trying to win in such a critical situation is disruptive, but most definitely a negative influence. And I think that was part of the strategy, and that is motor racing.
History shows this sort of thing happens, particularly when Ferrari find themselves in a competitive position, and they take the approach that they fight the battle off the track and on the track, so it's not unexpected.
A drive-through penalty after contact with Rubens Barrichello in the US Grand Prix finally ended Montoya's fading title chances, and Schumacher and Ferrari eventually won the championship yet again. Meanwhile, a young British driver from Stevenage in the UK had been making a name for himself lower down the racing ladder. At the age of 10, Lewis Hamilton had boldly introduced himself to Ron Dennis at the Autosport Awards dinner and informed him of his dream of driving for McLaren.
He just walked up to me at the end of the Autosport Awards and said, Mr. Dennis, I looked around. I couldn't see him, he was so small. He sort of looked down and there was this young guy.
I met Ron and I went up to him and I was very confident. I said, one day I want to drive your car or something like that. He wrote down, quote me in 9 years and I'll sort you out a deal.
It didn't take anything like that long. Aided by McLaren, by 2000 he'd progressed to world #1 in the Formula A kart rankings. And in 2003, he secured the Formula Renault UK Car Racing Championship by winning 10 races, taking 11 pole positions and 9 fastest laps with Manor Motorsport. By their own admission, Williams failed to build on the solid 2003 foundation to launch a title challenge in 2004, and Montoya's mounting frustration boiled over when he stormed out of a sponsor's press conference in the season opener in Melbourne after being heckled.
Well, I didn't find it funny, a guy asking me if I wanted to play golf with his grandmother or whatever. I thought, I didn't tell him anything, I wasn't rude to anybody, I just say, sorry, excuse me, and I stand up and I left.
Since the summer of 2003, there'd been rumours of him moving to McLaren for 2004. But at Monza, Ron Dennis refuted them firmly. But by the time Montoya won in Brazil at the end of a troubled year, he'd finally signed to replace Coulthard at the Woking team, as the Scot switched to the new Red Bull outfit for 2005. Much was expected of Montoya's partnership with Kimi Räikkönen at McLaren in 2005. Despite his occasionally arrogant and aggressive behaviour and his hair trigger when things went wrong, senior managers Ron Dennis and Martin Whitmarsh were adamant that they could channel the maverick Colombian's passion and energy better, and extract all of the potential he first demonstrated on his arrival in F1. But he had another tough season. Tyre changes were now banned in races, forcing drivers to preserve their rubber throughout each one. And as Raikkonen vied with Renault's Fernando Alonso for the title, which eventually fell to the Spaniard, as each won 7 races, Montoya was generally outclassed by his teammate and won only 3. Things were much happier for Hamilton, who won the prestigious Formula 3 Euro Series with 15 victories from the 20 races, and almost double the points of his nearest rival. It didn't take long for things to take a downhill direction for Montoya in 2005. He finished 6th, 2 places ahead of Räikkönen in the season opener in Australia, then 4th in Malaysia. But before Bahrain, he sustained an injury, apparently while playing tennis, which cracked a bone in one shoulder.
Hey Gordo, don't play tennis, you're not good at it.
He was forced to miss both the Bahrain and San Marino races. Suspicion was rife in the paddock that he'd actually hurt himself, not while holding a racket in one hand, but after falling off a trials bike. As one cynic in the F1 paddock remarked, the only way he'd have hurt himself like that in tennis would be if he'd been playing on the Burj Khalifa in Dubai and then fallen off. Ron Dennis insisted he was not concerned what his drivers did away from races, and that he would know whether the Colombian was being honest when he posed the key questions while looking him in the eye. He never vouchsafed the outcome of that particular meeting.
I haven't seen him yet, so I can't give you any better explanation than the one I gave you. I mean, he is back in Europe. He's back in Madrid, and our physiotherapist has seen him, and situation is as before. I've got nothing to add.
Dennis and Whitmarsh maintained their outward silence, but were not impressed. When he returned, Räikkönen generally had the upper hand, winning the Spanish and Monaco races, while the Colombian's chance in Canada petered out when a mistimed pit call triggered a sequence of events that led to him being excluded after missing the red stoplight at the end of the pit lane.
It should have been a 1-2, and we're here fighting for both championships, and I just think that the problem with a black flag is you're unable to protest it after the event. I just can't see that the crime fitted punishment. It really did.
He did win races, however, in Italy and Brazil, but mixed in with these successes were some silly incidents with other drivers when his temperament intervened.
People assume I did a brake test, but the only real reason I move off is to avoid an accident, not to create one. And if you really look at it, the only person that really moved off and created the accident was Coulthard.
And generally, he was overshadowed again by the calmer Räikkönen. There were also suggestions outside the team that he didn't take his fitness seriously enough. His relationship with the management remained a disappointment, and it was clear even from the outside that it had not gelled in the way that Dennis and Whitmarsh so confidently predicted. Raikkonen was hardly a prototype for perfect corporate behaviour, but Monty remained his own man. Talented and fast, charming and charismatic at times, but also moody and willful. A maverick who could not be contained by the straitjacket in which McLaren at that time demanded to dress its drivers. The relationship failed to improve, not helped by both Montoya and Raikkonen struggling to be competitive in the new MP421.
Normally through there, you're in traction control and you lean on the traction control, and for some reason it just went. And then the engine just stopped as well. That is kind of weird, but I don't know what happened.
That was nowhere near as close to pacemakers Renault and a recovering Ferrari as 2005's MP420. And McLaren's announcement in December the previous year that Alonso would race for them in 2007 did nothing to improve things. Raikkonen, however, had secretly signed for Ferrari before he even drove his new McLaren. Meanwhile, Hamilton joined F1's feeder series GP2, so 2006 would be a critical year for him too, under the watchful eyes of McLaren's Ron Dennis and Martin Whitmarsh. As the season neared its midpoint, sources within McLaren made it clear that Montoya's contract wouldn't be renewed when it expired at the end of the year. But the end came sooner than expected. He'd already caused much upset in the third race in Australia by spinning on the formation lap.
Oh, someone spun it. It's Montoya. Juan Pablo Montoya is pointing sideways onto the grid. And I believe that if all the cars go past him, because he's on his parade lap, he'll have to start from the back of the grid, won't he?
You're right, he switched the traction control off, I suspect, and just dropped it. How embarrassing. I can't think of anything more embarrassing than that.
And then later going so hard over a curb that it punched a hole in the bottom of his chassis and triggered the default that shut off the engine. Nor had it gone well that he had raged at his crew when it was decided to stack both cars during a pit stop on the 34th lap.
Nose change for Raikkonen. Look, Martin, it's taking time, and Montoya is queued up behind him. This is costing McLaren richly. Look at this.
In Canada, he clipped a wall and broke his suspension. But it was the US Grand Prix at Indianapolis that decided his fate. The 22 cars headed into a funnel in the first two corners, a 90-degree right, followed by a 90-degree left. And there was the almost inevitable accident, as some who'd been running 5 or even 6 abreast into the deceleration zone had to hit the brakes very hard and negotiate the corners in single file. Honda's Jenson Button squeezed Raikkonen as the Finn attacked on the inside of the second corner. And as Raikkonen had to brake to avoid Button, he was hit from behind by Montoya. The Colombian also hit Button and shoved him into BMW Sauber driver Nick Heidfeld, who was launched into a spectacular barrel roll. The chain of eye-raising incidents culminated in an F1 cardinal sin: contact with your teammate. Embarrassingly, the whole incident was witnessed by senior Mercedes-Benz figures who travelled to the event from Stuttgart. And both McLaren and Mercedes were among the early retirements. Even before the race fell to Michael Schumacher, there were rumours that Montoya was a cat who'd exhausted his 9 lives. Meanwhile, Hamilton had already ignited his GP2 season by winning the 5th and 6th races in Germany, blistering the opposition in Monaco, and twice again on his home ground at Silverstone. The racing world was beginning to sit up and take notice. He told both Dennis and Whitmarsh that he was ready for F1, but was told that he had a job to do, winning the GP2 title, and to wait. The gossip about Montoya turned out to be correct, though the reality was that his career at McLaren was effectively already over before that unfortunate incident at Indy, which had merely expedited his departure. But did he choose to jump, or was he pushed?
I don't regret any the decisions in respect of Juan Pablo, and I don't wish him anything other than a successful future career.
Juan Pablo is an exciting driver, an immensely likeable character, who will undoubtedly make a successful transition to the NASCAR scene, Ron Dennis said somewhat obliquely. We have agreed that with so many things happening, he should take some time out of the car and prepare professionally and personally for the future.
The timing of Juan Pablo's announcement, I don't think was well judged, and clearly put myself and many of my colleagues in a position which felt that his commitment to the balance of the season was going to be questionable.
The mercurial Colombian was replaced for the remainder of the season by McLaren's test driver, a very popular Spaniard called Pedro de la Rosa.
I got the phone call from Martin Whitmer saying that I would be in Magny-Cours. I was very excited, obviously, unexpected, and here I am.
Montoya's departure was the big break for De La Rosa, who previously raced for Arrows and Jaguar. He had stood in for the Colombian in Bahrain the previous year and scored points on his racing debut for the McLaren team.
The car was very strong, and I must say the rear tires, they worked very well in the heat. And I needed 20 more laps, really, because my car was in a very good condition.
When I was racing before, I was only 40%. Now, I'm a lot better than that, the 33-year-old Spaniard said after working as McLaren's development driver since 2003. If I have a good day, I can be as quick as any of my teammates, and that gives a guy a lot of self-confidence. I'm extremely thrilled to have this opportunity to race a car in which I'm really comfortable. He was seen as a safe pair of hands, and demonstrated that by finishing second to Button in the rain-spoiled Hungarian Grand Prix.
Good job, guys. This one for you. I'm very proud of your work. Great stuff.
Good job, Pedro. Nice, calm overtaking.
With Fernando Alonso joining McLaren in 2007 from Renault, De La Rosa's results showed he would be a strong number 2 to the reigning champion. Meanwhile, in the post-race press conference at the Italian Grand Prix on September the 10th, winner Michael Schumacher informed a shocked world that he would retire at the end of the season after 15 years of racing and 7 world championships.
I've decided together with the team that I'm going to retire from racing. It has been an exceptional, really exceptional time what motorsport in more than 30 years has given to me. I really loved every single moment of the good and the bad ones. Those ones make life so special.
It was obviously pretty emotional on the in-lap after the race, informing everybody of my decision, he said. That, and being on the podium knowing it was the last opportunity here, with such a crowd. I'm sorry that it took longer than you would have wanted, but this is the right moment. But the same question asked of Montoya was asked of the man many at the time regard as the greatest ever. Did he choose to jump, or was he pushed? Had chairman Luca de Montezemolo's insistence on signing Raikkonen put him into a position of having to accept for the first time a teammate seemed to be his match, or one where he could retire with his head held high? Nobody was saying, but he made it clear that it had been a joint decision. As expected, Ferrari announced the signing of Raikkonen as Schumacher's replacement, so now it was definite that a seat was open at McLaren. Dennis and Whitmarsh faced a conundrum over the choice of Alonso's partner for 2007, since it was clear that Raikkonen was headed for Ferrari. Did they opt for the reliable and easygoing De La Rosa, or make a much more dramatic choice? Neither Dennis nor Whitmarsh had ever made any secret of their faith in Hamilton. In addition to his victories in GP2, he'd achieved solid placings on the days when he couldn't win, and ultimately took the championship from Nelson Piquet Jr. But he was desperate as his fight with the Brazilian reached its climax to get some sort of indication from McLaren. And just before the crucial final races, the message came through. There is a possibility that you could race with us next year. It was exactly the fillip he needed. Suddenly, there was now every chance of the dream he shared with his mentoring father Anthony becoming reality. He first tested an F1 car for McLaren in September 2006, and was sufficiently impressive that Dennis and Whitmarsh decided he really was ready. Upon hearing the news that rather than his countryman De La Rosa, his partner would be a rookie, albeit one who had just won the GP2 title, an incredulous Alonso revealed his feelings as he asked Dennis, "So you don't want to win the World Championship for Constructors?" The young Spaniard, now twice a world champion with Renault after taking the 2006 title too, was about to get a nasty surprise.
It's a new experience for me, so I just want to take it slow and do the best job I can. So if that means winning, then hopefully.
It wasn't long before Alonso realised that his new teammate was a firebrand. Hamilton confidently passed Alonso for second place in his first corner of F1 racing.
Stunning start by Lewis Hamilton, up into third place. Alonso now has to get past him. What an amazingly composed start by Lewis Hamilton.
They spent the rest of the year racing each other hard, and the relationship between them quickly became strained because of Hamilton's outstanding pace.
What a drive, what a mega star we've got on our hands with Lewis Hamilton. Absolutely sensational, faultless, brilliant performance.
So did Alonso's relationship with McLaren, whom he accused of favouring the British driver at the expense of his own championship challenge. Against the backdrop of the Spygate affair, in which disgruntled employees of Ferrari and McLaren appropriated intellectual property from the former team and tried to sell themselves to Honda or Toyota, Alonso and Hamilton battled it out. They argued over the priority of qualifying runs in Hungary.
Now Alonso's not getting on with it, only a minute and 40 to go. Is he blocking Hamilton here?
I'm not angry. I'm curious to the reason why I had to wait.
Prompting Alonso to threaten Dennis that he would inform the FIA of what he knew about the Spygate controversy unless he received preferential treatment from there on. That forced Dennis to call FIA President Max Mosley and tell him what he'd just learnt. McLaren were fined $100 million and excluded from the 2007 Constructors' World Championship.
We have some difficult pressures in the team, but making specific comments about any individual in the team is inappropriate. Nevertheless, as I've said, we will continue to function as a Grand Prix team with specific values, and if anybody does not want to be part of those values, irrespective of where they sit in the organisation, then ultimately they will have choice.
At the end of the acrimonious season, both Hamilton and Alonso found themselves 1 point short of Raikkonen, who came through to win the title for Ferrari at the 11th hour.
Kimi Raikkonen wins the Brazilian Grand Prix. Kimi Raikkonen is world champion.
To Alonso's chagrin, though he and Hamilton, the rookie he had denigrated the previous December, each had 109 points and 4 victories, Hamilton received the second place trophy at the FIA's prize-giving gala on the strength of 5 second places to Alonso's 4.
It's been an incredible year, and I'm still quite happy. If you think about it, I've come from GP2. Who would have thought I would be ranked number 2 in my first year of Formula 1?
Alonso returned to Renault, having no interest in partnering Hamilton as an equal and no longer a rookie in 2008. By mid-season, after the British Grand Prix, it was clear that McLaren and Hamilton had strong competition from Ferrari. Hamilton and Ferrari's Raikkonen and Felipe Massa were each tied on 48 points. Having come into the final race of 2008 leading the championship, showers at Interlagos threw a spanner in the works for Hamilton. As the race came to a close, a mistake cost him 5th place.
Hamilton's gone wide.
He's got grip, but Hamilton's lost it. Oh my goodness me! Vettel's taken the place, and that could cost Hamilton the World Championship.
Oh, it's
now raining hard. He needs 5th or better to win the World Championship. He is currently 6th.
It looked all but over. But there was an anomaly in the top 6. Timo Glock, who had fueled to finish the race before the rain came, was the only car of the 6 on slick tyres, and the track was getting wetter. Catching Glock with vastly more grip, Hamilton executed what has since become one of the most famous passes to secure championship victory in the history of the sport.
Is that Glock going slowly?
It is, it's Glock! Oh my goodness me! Hamilton's back in position again! 100,000 local hearts sink in the grandstands. It's handed the place back to Hamilton. He comes through, and if I'm absolutely right, I'm sure that he is going to claim 5th place, which is all he needs to do to become the 2008 Formula One World Champion.
Unbelievable.
The celebrations are now legendary, the scenes momentous.
Guys, I'm speechless.
But so many small moments could have altered the course to Hamilton's first championship. If the rain had fallen later in that race, or Alonso had stayed with McLaren and taken more championship points than Kovalainen, and if Montoya hadn't had his infamous tennis injury, would he and Alonso have proven the star lineup Dennis wanted, leaving no space for Hamilton to make the splash he did in 2007. This is the nature of these small butterfly effects in Formula One, on which drivers' failures and fortunes rest.